Good evening, everybody. My name is Donni Engelhart, and I work in the field of business valuation. So I want to answer one simple question. How do people decide on value? Facebook, apparently worth $50 billion. Groupon, the site that sells discounted yoga lessons, worth $6 billion. So is this reasonable? Is it insane? And how can we know when measuring value just seems so subjective? So the craft of business valuation attempts to provide a common framework of methodologies to help people decide about something that is inherently subjective. An agreement about value is really important because it facilitates the flow of business. If people can't agree on things, buyers won't buy, sellers won't sell, and investors won't invest, and lenders won't lend. So how do we overcome this? So tonight I want to use the example of the Baltimore Ravens and go into one example of how to use business valuation technique. Now, like Facebook and Twitter, we're intimately familiar with the product, but most fans have thought very little about the Ravens as a business. So where would we even begin in trying to put a value on the Baltimore Ravens? So the first step in any business valuation is getting a sense of the business itself, how it operates, how it generates money, and its competitive environment. So let's start with the business of NFL franchises. So the Ravens are one of 32 teams in the National Football League, which, believe it or not, is actually a registered nonprofit organization. And the teams themselves are for-profit, and they make money a variety of different ways. One main way is actually through the NFL's profit-sharing arrangement, and if you're paying attention to collective bargaining agreement, it's really interesting. Okay, so we'll dive into what that is. National TV broadcasting rights are pooled together and sold by the NFL collectively as a package. The proceeds from the networks are then divided equally among the teams. This is to help smaller market teams stay competitive, and it's the biggest source of revenue. Ticket sales, also known as gate proceeds, are split. 60% is kept by the home team. 40% is usually kept by the visiting team. It's a little more complicated than that. And this does not include proceeds from luxury box suites. That's kept by the home team. Sales of NFL merchandise is split with some exceptions. So if you buy a Ray Lewis jersey on NFL.com, an equal portion of the proceeds actually goes to the Steelers. So you may as well have bought a Heinz Ward jersey. Sorry. Now, teams are also free to develop sources of revenue that are not shared, such as, well, the reason for this is basically for owners to be able to increase unshared revenue and maximize franchise potential that way. Stadium naming rights is one way, concession revenues is another. So we've estimated that the Ravens generate about $270 million in revenue, which is near the top of the league. Not surprising, very loyal fan base. They sell out every game since they moved here from Cleveland, actually, in the 90s. So what do we do with the $270 million number, and how do we convert that to a value for the franchise? So I want to take you through one method of business valuation, which is based on this premise. The value of a business can be ascertained through comparison with similar businesses for which prices are known. So while we don't know the value of the Ravens per se, we can compare it. We do have data on transactions, recent transactions of other NFL franchises that recently sold, namely the Rams, the Steelers, and the Dolphins. Now, I think we can agree that these are good businesses to compare to the Ravens. They're all NFL franchises. So what we can do is examine the pricing of these franchises in relation to their revenues, and through that kind of estimate the value of the Ravens based on its revenue. So here are the three transactions. And as you see, the prices paid range kind of between 3 times and 4 times annual team revenue. And we're not going to use the Steelers transaction because it was between family members, so it's not good to rely on that. And the Dolphins included stadium ownership rights, so it's a little bit complicated. So we focused on this one transaction involving the Rams. And we've kind of, well, the Rams transaction is very recent, first of all. It didn't include stadium ownership rights, and it occurred at an arm's length between third-party bidders. So it's a good transaction to use. And we've looked at a comparison now, basically of the two franchises, and the Ravens stack up actually pretty nicely. These are some of the factors that kind of go into the economic earning potential of a franchise and thus its value. You could see stadium capacity is higher for the Ravens, average ticket price is higher, their revenues are much higher. The other interesting metric that I came across too is called the player cost to win ratio, which measures the efficiency of a team in winning based on its roster. And as you could have seen, the higher the better. The Ravens was 130 and the Rams was 12. So the Ravens stack up very favorably, actually. And what we see is that the Rams transaction the Rams were valued at about 3.4 times revenue. So based on the favorable attributes, I would say that the Ravens would probably be valued higher, at about 3.75 times of revenues. So based on this analysis, we've seen that the valuation of the Ravens is slightly north of $1 billion. And typically in a business valuation, there's a lot more detail that's known compared to what we actually know about the Ravens, so it's more in-depth, and this was admittedly crude. But I hope now you've got a little bit of a sense of what would go into a business valuation of the Baltimore Ravens. Thank you.